All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the March 2019 PSCP webinar. We have some really awesome presentations today, so hopefully you're all excited. Just to give you a little info about who's helping put on today's webinar, I'm Mary Nordini, the host. We have Quentin Booth as my co-producer, who's doing a lot of great work to help out. And then for our chat monitor, we have Mike Horn, one of the new interns, and then Campbell Ponton is our tech support, and she's another new intern. So thank them a lot for jumping right into helping us out on everything. And also a big thanks to our PSCP board. We have Michelle Malloy, who is here with us today. And then Megan Brown, who is actually out for some training. And then Claire Anderson, who I also don't think was able to make it on today. But they help put PSCP on and do a lot for you guys. So big thanks to them. And just a reminder, if you want to ask a question or if you have any comments, don't forget to unmute yourself on the phone or microphone. On your screen, you'll be able to see at the bottom whether you are unmuted or not, so just make sure to do that if you're wanting to speak up. To kick things off, we always like to start with a quote, so I have chosen one by Socrates. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. So as we transition into spring and have a lot of new things happening, just work on building and managing all those new changes rather than fighting the old, and remember how you can help your people along with that as well. So we're going to let Michelle speak to the purpose and direction for the PSCP.
Good morning, everyone. I can't believe that March is almost gone, and we're getting ready to go into April. I wanted to just really quickly cover our overall vision for change management is to ensure that those impacted by change are successful with that change. And our group is really an agnostic group of change management professionals that we all want to come together and learn from each other and build our knowledge so that we can definitely help those impacted by change. We want to inspire and lead change throughout the world, and I'm sure we're all doing that every day. So welcome to PSCP this morning, and I hope you enjoy our webinar.
All right. And then you guys are all a very important aspect to this community and this group. So if you're not presenting, then you can speak up with your questions. You can always share your experiences and your info. It really helps us if you complete those surveys after the webinar, and questions are always great. We love to hear questions. We love to ask our own questions. So if you have any, please don't hesitate to ask them. A quick overview of the agenda. You have me talking at you right now about all the announcements and the work ahead, and next we will have Bill Brovsky presenting. He's with Denver Human Services, and then after we have our own Gary Vansuch presenting, and then there's going to be the open forum for you to follow up with any questions or have any announcements, and then we will close out for the day. So we're going to hand things over to Bill. If you want to take control, Bill.
Uh-oh, it doesn't. Bill, I don't know if we can hear you on our end. Can you hear him?
So he has, I think he is doing a video and he also called in, so his call in might be.
Oh. What is his?
It's just Bill Brovsky. That's how it was earlier. Oh yeah, it looks like it's.
Can you? I can't find it.
It's like it looks like right under his video.
Oh.
All right, can you speak now, Bill?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
all right.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
So you should just be able to double click and take control and go for it.
Okay, so if I'm going to double click, I'm going to double click on share screen or what?
I passed over control to you, so all you should have to do is
okay, let me
click
click the PowerPoint real quick to make sure you have that on the screen. Can you see that now?
No, we're still on the agenda.
Okay.
Try your arrow keys.
Hold on here. Okay, so let me just do this here real quick. Give up remote control. Should we do that?
I think you have control. You just need to move on to the next slide. You should be able to go with the arrow key.
Slide. That's what you're saying. Okay, hold on. And I can't click on the next slide. So let me think about this.
Wait, click the presentation first just to make sure that you have control.
Okay, where is, okay, so I have the presentation.
Perfect.
All right.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. You can see that now, right?
Yep, we're all good.
Very good. Well, hey, listen, thank you for having me today and to speak on leadership and specifically how that relates to change management. So I really, really do appreciate it. Before I get started, though, I want to say I am a leadership and development consultant, and I started my own company a few years back based on one Gallup poll statistic. And that one statistic would really change how I fundamentally view leadership in general and how I lead people today. And I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting in my office as the chief cultural officer of a company, and I was staying late one night reading my emails, and a Gallup poll came in that said 70% of US employees hated their jobs. I thought that was an amazing statistic. I didn't believe it, and I actually did some more research on it, and sure enough, there were 2 Gallup polls in a row that said 70% of US employees hated their jobs. This was not my experience in leading large groups of people for over 30 years. I mean, in fact, my experience taught me that people didn't leave organizations because they hated their jobs. People left organizations because they hated their bosses. I started my company, ProTier Leadership, to inspire people and organizations how to become extraordinary leaders. My presentation today is how to build, protect, and defend inspiring cultures and how that relates to change management. When building inspiring cultures, there are a few assumptions that you have to make, and that is basically table stakes. And those assumptions are this: that we hire the right people with the right stuff, that we hire them based on competency, we hire them based on chemistry and character. And most organizations that run into problems really focus on one thing, and that's hiring just based on competency alone. We have to assume that we promote the right leaders, and those leaders we're promoting, we look at high levels of emotional intelligence and high levels of empathy. We have to assume that we have an inspiring mission where people are motivated to come to work, and they're motivated to come to work because they have meaningful work. And then we have to lead with a sound set of principles and values, and these are basically making decisions based on belief systems that guide the decisions that we make. When creating inspiring cultures, you have to start with a solid foundation. And it's a foundation really built on culture, leadership, and performance. Results matter. If you don't get results, then really culture is one of the first things to go in organizations. The idea is to get results the right way through a values-driven culture based on trust, empowerment, and accountability, where results are a byproduct of doing things right. When you look at culture, it's really creating safe environments where people feel psychologically safe. It's hiring the right stuff that we just talked about, hiring based on competency, character, and chemistry. And it's living the values of the organization at all levels of the organization. And it's creating a culture of learning where people are free to take risks and mistakes are tolerated for the purposes of learning. On the leadership side, it's promoting leaders based on high levels of emotional intelligence and empathy. It's focusing on servant leadership. It's leading by trust and intent, empowering people to do the right thing and then holding them accountable. And it's establishing a true connection with all people that we lead. On the performance side, it's really communicating with purpose and clarity. We talk a lot here in Denver Human Services about the importance of when we make a decision, we communicate the why. The why meaning when we make those decisions, why it is important to the organization, why is it important to the leader or the people that we lead, and why is it important to the families we serve or the clients we serve. On the performance side, it's also fostering environments of teamwork and collaboration. It's celebrating successes and rewarding those people that are creating the most value towards an organization. And it's displaying effective feedback. meaning that leaders care personally and they can challenge their people directly. But what makes organizations extraordinary and what makes them sustainable? A Harvard Business Review white paper was published not too long ago analyzing the top organizations throughout America. They were looking at things like results and performance, but they also looked at things like employee engagement, turnover rates, innovation, and market dominance. And what they found was all extraordinary organizations really had two things. They had high levels of psychological safety where people could speak their mind and their voice really mattered. They could speak freely, honestly, and respectfully. And the other thing that they had was all of their leaders possessed high levels of emotional intelligence and empathy. They had a true connection with the people that they served. So how does this relate to change management? In my experience, when an organization is going through any kind of change, whether it be big or small, it always goes better when employees feel safe and they know that their leaders truly care about them. So let's explore actually psychological safety and connections leaders would have with the people that they serve. This is a quadrant of the 4 zones of psychological safety. On one axis, it measures psychological safety, and on the other axis, it measures getting results the right way. Employees who have low levels of trust or psychological safety and are not achieving results, they're typically what we would consider to be in the apathy zone. This is a zone that really is indicative of a fear-based organization. Leaders are not able to build relationships with their people. People feel like their contributions are not valued, and trust and goodwill are eroded over time. Employees that have low levels of psychological safety and trust, but they do achieve results, usually live in the anxiety zone. And that is really a depiction of leaders place unrealistic demands on their people. They have high expectations with limited clarity, and results matter more than people. This could be indicative of a metric-only organization. People who have high levels of trust and psychological safety but do not get the results that they deserve typically live in the comfort zone. And this zone looks like leaders instill false hope to protect their people. Leaders cannot be real about the state of the business nor ask for help when they need it. And leaders would rather be liked than effective. When people live in the learning zone, this is where they feel psychologically safe and they get sustainable results. And basically what the learning zone looks like is people are free to take risks and mistakes are tolerated for the sole purposes of learning. Everyone in the learning zone is clear about the objectives and how their metrics and measurements line up and are aligned with the organization's mission. And in this zone, people are growing, they're developing, and they're learning. So how does psychological safety relate to change management? Change, in my experience, always goes better in organizations when we're working from the learning zone, where people are free to take risks, they're clear about where they're going, and they're growing, developing, and learning always. This is a quadrant that basically looks at the 4 corners of connection. And basically, these are examples of the type of connection leaders would have with the people they lead. On one axis, we measure empathy. On the other axis, we measure getting results the right way. Leaders that possess low levels of empathy and are not getting the results from the people that they serve typically have no connection with the people they lead. They lack empathy, they lack emotional intelligence, and they typically lack self-awareness. They are not able to build solid relationships. They put people on the sidelines, then forget about them, and they're unable to have an emotional connection with the people that they lead. Leaders that possess low levels of empathy but are getting results for the organization lead from a bad connection. And basically what that looks like is results matter more than people. Leaders are critical. They take credit when things are going great, and then they blame others when things go south. People feel like they cannot make mistakes. They feel bad about it. And this is typically looks at a fear-based organization. Leaders that possess high levels of empathy but do not get the kind of results that they deserve from their people usually lead from what we call a false good connection. And this looks like this. They cannot be authentic and real. They place false hope on their people. They cannot ask for help when they need it. And they shield their people from the biggest challenges of an organization. Leaders that possess high levels of empathy and achieve sustainable results typically lead from what we call the box, which is a true connection. They can be vulnerable and they can admit mistakes. They understand the power of the other and put others first. They step back so others can win, and they truly understand that their people's success is their success by default. How does this relate to change management? In my experience, when leaders have a true connection with people that they lead with, that's where they can be honest about the state of the business always. They can always ask for help from their people, and their people know that they truly care about them and they have their back. All extraordinary organizations measure the right things. They put models in place to measure the right things. They revamp internal surveys to measure now psychological safety and empathy. They align metrics with meaning, so people are very clear about the metrics and the measurements and how that relates to the mission of the organization. They look at turnover rates always, the employee engagement studies and performance standards often. So once you've created or built a solid foundation that we would consider to be a really good culture of performance, now how do you protect and defend it going forward? I call this the 4 quads of sustainability. To look at these 4 quadrants, this is the quadrants depicting a typical supervisor's current time and energy while managing the people that they lead. On one axis, we look at living the values of the organization, and on the other axis, we're looking at sustainability and results. In many organizations, many supervisors spend about 80% of their time with people not living the values of the organization nor getting results. We spend a lot of time complaining about their performance and then worrying about getting sued when we try to do something about it. Current time and energy with people not living the values of the organization but getting results, we spend very, very little time with them. So what do? We tolerate them not living the values of the organization. We ignore them not living the values of the organization because they get results. So we look the other way. With people that are actually living the values of the organization, but they're not getting the results they deserve, current time and energy spent by most supervisors is about 15% training and coaching their folks on how to be successful. And in this model, very little time is spent. Almost 15% of current time and energy is spent on growing and developing our people that are actually living the values of the organization and actually delivering the results the right way. In this model, 80% of time and energy spent on people not living the values of the organization. And I work with companies a lot in this model. And what I will tell you is this model is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for growth, and it's not sustainable to get the kind of performance you would typically see out of a high performance organization. So this leads me to, where should we spend our current time and energy? Where should we spend our time? And in the box that's indicated red, and that's people that are not living the values of the organization and they are not achieving results. We shouldn't spend 80% of our time there, but we should spend 10% of our time here really effectively. And what I mean by that, it's delivering messages to these people indicating that there is zero tolerance for people not living the values of the organization nor achieving results. It is protecting and defending the culture. How do you do this? You have to engage HR and ensure that all of the required boxes are checked to move these people out correctly. We cannot be held hostage by people who are not living the values of the organization nor delivering results. There should be no room for interpretation about the severity of the messages we deliver to these people. We have to have clear expectations and consequences, explaining the why very clearly. Why is it critical, and why is it a requirement for our employees to live the values and get results the right way? In my experience, when we're delivering and we're being crystal clear about these kinds of messages, people that don't typically fit the organization will leave on their own. Yeah, I can't bring this next one in. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, the presentation actually froze on the next box, but I'm going to talk about this next box, and I'm going to refer to it as a yellow box. You can see that, right?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Okay. This is a box where people are not living the values of the organization, but they are delivering results. And I don't know why that's not advancing for some reason. Let me try this again. Oh, there we go. Okay, here we go. Typically, we should spend only about 10% on these folks, and that is because we should be spending our time with very clear messages and coaching and modeling for performance. Achieving results but not living the values of an organization will not be tolerated. Those are the messages that have to be clear. It is extremely dangerous to let this behavior go unchecked. And in my experience, it actually destroys the culture over time because people realize that these people can get results, but they're not living the values of the organization. So in terms of coaching and modeling, it's coaching and modeling how we should live the values and achieve results the right way. It's to be clear about expectations and consequences, explaining why living the values and getting results is a requirement. It's to seek commitment and accountability, and really to not get trapped in this box with these folks. These people are masters at telling you that because they get results for you, you should leave them alone. And when you're trying to build a sustainable culture, you have to depend on those people not only to achieve results, but also to live the values of the organization. In my experience, these people can be turned around, but you have to be crystal clear about your objectives. You have to be crystal clear about your messages in this box. And typically you can turn them around, but at the bottom line, if they can't live the values of the organization and get results, then we need to look at engaging HR to help them understand that or move them out of the organization. So it is important to engage HR in both of these boxes. "40% of our time and energy should really be spent on people living the values of the organization, but not getting results. And these are people that I would consider are worth the investment. They have the right stuff. We need to do everything we can to train them and coach them effectively. And it might be looking at our training programs to make sure that they're effective. But if you're doing everything you can, coaching and training them effectively, but they're still not getting the results they deserve, then we should really seek out HR and try to find places where they can be successful within an organization. In this box, we have to deliver clear goals and expectation, explain why it's important to not only live the values of which they are, but also we have to achieve results. We have to jointly create a clear path to success and seek agreement and commitment from them. And it's always important to get HR involved because HR knows where openings are in organizations and can be on the lookout on how these people could better fit. And we should spend about 40% of our time on people that are actually living the values of the organization and achieving results the right way. This is a box where we grow and develop and promote leaders with high levels of emotional intelligence and empathy. It's expressing your commitment to their career growth and development. It's recognizing and rewarding them for the value they create in the organization. It's grooming them to take on bigger leadership roles. It's using them as role models for living the values and getting results the right way. And it's engaging HR so they can be on the lookout for us and help them promote these people into more meaningful roles. This is a model that is sustainable. It's sustainable because 80% of our time and energy is actually spent on people living the values of the organization. I'll leave you with this. This doesn't work unless you have a few things. Trying to build a culture is one thing. Trying to protect it and defend it is another. So this does not work unless it's supported at all levels of the organization. We are very fortunate here at Denver Human Services that it's supported from the top down. We have quarterly workshops teaching people how to do this effectively, but it has to be supported at all levels of the organization. Human resources needs to be a collective partner. We have to work with human resources all along the way to make this work. And we have to proactively work with human resources, not reactively work with human resources to build, protect, and defend the kind of culture that we deserve. That's all I have. I do want to thank you again for letting me talk on this. And thank you for spending the time with me today. And good luck on building, protecting, and defending inspiring cultures. Thank you.
Pressing question. Oh, thank you so much, Bill. If anyone has any pressing questions, you can go ahead and ask them now. All right, and next up we have Gary Vansuch here at CDOT.
So, yeah, Mike, if you want to read aloud the comments that are coming through the chat, or if there's any questions.
Sure. The first question from Ted Herbert and everyone on his side. All of this assumes that the values that are being promoted and reinforced are positive and people-focused values. Some orgs have values that do not honor people and psychological safety. So I guess they're asking your opinion on how to deal with that, Bill.
Yeah, I think we were fortunate here in Denver Human Services because we had a mission that actually was very, very inspiring. It was protecting all people in harm's way. They went at this thing and they did put in a sound set of principles and values that they considered would support and be aligned with that mission. So to be honest with you, they call them the STARS values. Their service, their teamwork, their accountability, their respect, and their safety. And it's interesting because when we went at this thing 2 years ago, safety took on a little bit different interpretation. It was more like physical safety 2 years ago. 90% of the folks you would talk to in the hall, when you talked about the STARS values, would say, what do you mean by safety? And they would say physical safety. If you ask that same question today in the building, 90% of the responses would be, it's psychological safety. So we really, really have been working hard on a few things. One is, how do you create safe environments where people can speak their minds freely, openly, and respectfully, because it is aligned with the values? How do you listen to them? And how do you develop leaders that really have high levels of emotional intelligence that can promote and live the values of the organization? I think that's really important. But I think all exceptional organizations have a great mission, have a great value structure that everybody pretty much agrees with. And then it just doesn't sit on the wall. We actually live the values of the organization. We actually live the mission of the organization, and we protect it. When those people fall outside of them, we have individual discussions with them. And in my opinion, if you can do those things right, then you will start creating an extraordinary organization. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I believe it does for Ted.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to ask the one about there's a question. Can we have links to your research? Is there a way that we could perhaps send those out after the forum?
Yeah, I can give you what I have. And a lot of the stuff is anecdotal information from the workshops that I have been doing these past 2 years. Yeah, but I can send you what I have for sure.
I think there's one more question if we can find it.
Yeah.
Bill,
Yes.
first they said great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
And significant parallels to the Shingo model for enterprise excellence. Does anyone in the group align with the Shingo model? Excuse me, the Shingo model.
I am not.
Is there anybody on from Utah? I know it's big in Utah. Anybody out there from Utah that might be using the Shingo Prize model?
How does it relate? Program we're changing introduces the 10 Shingo guiding principles.
All right, well, thank you everyone for your questions. We will still have the forum if anything comes to mind during the next presentation about either. So now I'm gonna hand things off to Gary here at CDOT so he can take things away.
All right. Thank you, Mary. And good morning, everyone.
Yeah. Bentley Connect. There you go.
Good morning. So we've talked about a couple different models. Again, appreciate our friend from City and County of Denver. Talked about a model there. Somebody brought up the Shingo Prize model. Actually going to talk another model with you. And this is the 7S model. You see it depicted there. And the presentation here, what is 7S and why should I care? Going to talk some about the model and some about how we're using it here at CDOT and has been used other places. This is a model. There are 7 key elements in this model, and this model suggests that you need to have all of these elements, first of all, looked at and aligned if an organization is to be successful. I'm going to put in front of you my usual admonition about models, and this is from George Box, a wonderful, probably one of the best statisticians from the 20th century, a statistical model builder. All models are flawed. Some models are useful. So I hope that you can take away this morning some useful material from this model, perhaps blended with other models for those of you using the Shingo model out there or the material that was just presented from Denver. Combine that and use it to make progress in your organization. Just a little bit of background. This is not something developed here at CDOT or by Gary. This is actually often called McKinsey 7S model from McKenzie and Company, the famous consulting company. 2 of the key people in the 1970s at McKinsey were Tom Peters and Robert Waterman. And many of you know, if you go to the right-hand side, in 1982, they published their seminal work, In Search of Excellence, essentially a compilation of best practices from companies that were successful over a long period of time. It's interesting how they came about that, and you see a short timeline here. McKinsey is famous for strategy work, and for those of you on board that might be from McKinsey, thank you for all of that. And found that some of their work on strategy back in the 70s was pretty successful, and some of it, frankly, wasn't. They gave Peters and Waterman free rein to really go out there and find out why. And what they found out is that the successful organizations were indeed taking their strategy work from McKinsey and combining it with other things. And that developed, those other things are the parts of the framework that we're going to go through this morning. The framework is a 7-piece framework. It does indeed have strategy in it. Strategy is the plan of action an organization needs to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. And there's a lot of key questions you could ask yourself about that. You know, starting certainly with what is strategy? What are our intended objectives? How do we deal with competitive pressure for those of you in the private sector? So strategy is really a hard side kind of thing. What do we need to achieve? And a second one related to that is structure. If we got a strategy and we have customers, what's the structure of the organization? How do we organize the business? Or if you're an agency like us, how do you organize our government unit so that we can be most effective on carrying out that strategy? And we would ask questions like, how is the organization divided? What's the hierarchy? How do the various departments coordinate? So key questions, but again, mostly on the hard side of things, what is often called the hard side of things. And then systems, also a hard side kind of consideration. What are the products and services, the processes that actually help the organization achieve what it needs to, and who are the customers for those products and services? So what are the main systems that run the organization? What are the internal rules? Who are those customers? Again, key questions to ask about systems. And from the work from Peters and Waterman that actually has been validated over the past 30 years by a lot of folks using this model. By the way, McKenzie says use this. They, I always try to give credit to McKenzie. They're not going to, if you use it, they're not going to require you to pay them. It's a key piece of knowledge that they've provided to the general world of government and business. On the soft side, they found that skills were crucially important. And skills are just exactly what you might think, the abilities of the organization's employees to perform well. So you'd ask yourself questions, how are those skills being monitored and assessed? Do we have the right skills in the organization? What are the strongest skills? What are the skills gaps? Do we actually have the ability to do the job? Then of course, staffing, do we have the right number and the right types of employees, and how do we recruit those employees on an ongoing basis? So of course, you'd ask yourself some questions like, what positions are really needed? And how does that evolve over time? Here at CDOT, we started 5 years ago a workforce adaptation effort, which is now morphed into our workforce of the future to say, what we're doing currently is wonderful, and we know that what we're doing in 5 or 10 years is going to be different. So how do we actually skill up the organization that's currently here, and also recruit new people onto the team to help us be successful for our customers in the future? Then there's style. What is the style of the organization? You heard our prior presenter talk about servant leadership. That's one style of leadership in the organization. So what is the leadership style? Is it participative? How effective is the leadership style? Do our employees tend to be cooperative or competitive? And again, in different environments, perhaps one or the other, or some blending is more appropriate. And then shared values, which really pulls together the other 5 S's. It's at the core of the 7S approach. When I talk about it being all about culture. So talking about this, you might ask yourself questions, what are the core values of the organization? What is the culture of the organization? How strong are those values in the culture? The reason culture is important, for those of you that know Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Again, the best strategy in the world, if you have a culture that doesn't support that, it won't be successful. What is culture? Well, I love what Brittany says, and I think this is about 2/3 of what culture is. Beliefs and behaviors that you value as a company and have everybody live true to them. They should be so much part of your core that you don't even think of it as culture. You just think about it as, this is the way things are done. I do like to add on to this, though, something that Karen Ross presented to me a few years ago. And she said, words both create and transmit organizational culture. So when I think about culture, I think about behaviors and beliefs and words that are the essence and the core of your organization. And of course, you never really know what people's beliefs are. They're not visible. But words and behaviors definitely are visible. And it's something that you can actually assess. You actually want to say, what is our desired culture? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What would you actually see in the organization? And then what's our current culture? And if those are identical, that's great. But as our prior presenter noted, they're not always the same. So is there some kind of gap? And then can you do something about that? And that's the strength of the 7S model, is that this shared values actually pull in these other elements that are so crucial, both on the hard side of improvement as well as the soft side of improvement. So, you know, if you were to look at words in the organization, would you see words like this? This is actually a word cloud of an actual survey of people describing their organization. I want to show you another word cloud of a real organization.
Oh, yeah.
And forgive me if some of the words are a little offensive. We tried to take out words that perhaps are less offensive, but this is an actual organization being described by people that are customers of that organization. I won't actually say what the organization is, but I'll give you a picture of that American institution that was being described. You want your organization to be described this way or in some other way. Anyways, that's our quick course on culture, its behaviors and beliefs and words. I've used this in a couple of different places, actually several different places. I used to work at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory about a decade ago. I love the mission of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, advancing the science and engineering of energy efficiency, sustainable transportation, renewable power technologies. It's a wonderful mission. There are a lot of wonderful folks that work there in science, and I was on a support staff there. And we decided that we would say, oh, what kind of support are we providing to our internal NREL customers? So we had an objective to define the direction for the quality group and actually start improving our support. We wanted to actually add better value to the lab, and this is actually from 2009. This is an actual unedited a meeting agenda that we had. If you'll note item 2A, our March 18th workshop, we invited various customers, but did so at the last minute, so none were able to make it. Bad on us, bad on us. We decided out of this meeting to actually do more, to actually engage our customers, to get them engaged in how we were going to provide service. And again, this is from 2009, and to actually include the elements of the 7S model on that. Perhaps done imperfectly, but when we did before and after surveys, we found that, yes, our customers found that we had more value after applying the elements of the 7S model. I currently work at the Colorado Department of Transportation. We plan, build, operate, and maintain the Colorado transportation system. And we have some wonderful shared values. Some folks talked about, there was a question in the question pane just recently to say, what if you have values that aren't people-focused? Thankfully, I don't think I've worked at any organization, at least in the past 20 years, where that's where we've had values that aren't people-focused. At CDOT, we certainly have people-focused values. These are our 6 value areas. We call them the Spicer values. If you take the first letter of each of the values, they spell this word, this non-word, Spicer. It's an interesting way to remember it. And we have people built in there, and safety and integrity. We have shared values that we work together with. And we've been recently applying the 7S model to a reorganization that we've been doing in CDOT. Instead of just locking people in a closet for 10 minutes and drawing a new organization chart, we've actually been engaging the people in the organization, asking key questions as we just covered off of the 7S model. And there's actually a strategy for the new organization. We're creating an integrated division to focus on real-time maintenance operations services so we can best support the crucial work of our regions, which is where most of the work at CDOT gets done, so that in turn we can provide that optimal service for our customers, the traveling public in Colorado. And we're using the other 7S elements to organize not just an organization chart, again, easy enough to do perhaps, but to actually get all of these elements working together to make that division more effective. Again, all models are flawed. I'm sure that we've had imperfect implementation of the 7S model, but we found it pretty useful here at CDOT. I found it useful at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and a few other organizations I've worked at in the past, and recommend it to you. I think it's a great way to blend change management, the people side of change, with some of the things that are on the harder side of the business, what often is called the hard side, the systems and the strategy and the structure of the organization, to blend those together so that they're more effective. And I'm open to your questions. Do we have any coming in from the chat pane, or if you can unmute yourself, please do so, and we'll try to handle your questions.
Yes, we do have one. It's from Ted. He says, I often see value statements that focus on accountability, excellence, results, customer satisfaction, etc. Some exposure values, like respect and integrity, but do not live by them.
So let me go back a few slides. You know, none of us are perfect, right? And I know we have imperfect implementation of our desires here at CDOT. You take what you've got, which is where you are. What is your current culture? Maybe it's imperfect implementation of what your values are. And then to say your desired culture is to actually get closer to that. Put a gap, you know, say what the gap is. Get everybody around the table. Don't just do this in a closet or someplace with one or two people, but get everybody around the table to recognize the issue, and then to step up and want to do something. You know, this is straightforward gap analysis. There are certainly more exotic tools out there, but a good place to start. What's the desired culture you've got? Perhaps it is those values, and you're not completely living those values. That's okay. It is what it is. You start from where you are and say, I actually want to do something different. I hope that's responsive to your thought there, Ted.
Until Ted responds, I do have another quick question. Someone would like to know how to implement the 7S model.
Okay, so there's a lot of elements to how. Let me just, again, our most recent experience here. Think about the principles of change management and effective leadership overall. It'd be one thing to say, I've got the 7S model and I'm going to push out a really large blast to all people in this organization email and to tell them to do it. Many people at CDOT know I hate telling plans. Communication plans, conversation plans are great. Telling plans, not so much. One-way telling is not a good thing. The way we've tried to avoid that here at CDOT with our most recent work with this is to actually get a lot of people engaged. We have, again, a reorganization. We're working to reorganize to structure more closely to support customers. We've gotten listening sessions together for every single person in the two organizations that are being combined together, and many of their customers. To get people engaged in the process is certainly a key element of the how. Now, you'll hear lots of different things, but it starts getting the conversation on the table. Instead of having conversations under the table or people worried about the reorganization, we have them being part of the reorganization. So however whatever your challenge is here, whatever your gap is, perhaps off of this slide or some other slide, I encourage you to start early and often with a lot of conversations with people that are engaged. If you think that you've got a value that isn't being completely lived, let's get some conversation about it. What does the current state look like? Do people have ideas for the future state? Nothing like asking folks that are engaged for their thoughts and ideas to actually come up with better thoughts and ideas, and to also engage their hearts and minds in wanting to do something different. So Ted, sorry, that's my thoughts about the how.
Another question from Corey Newmeyer, a little bit late to the party, but he would like to know, CDOT come up with their values? Was it top down? Was it bottom up? And which do you recommend?
And which values do I recommend?
The top down approach or bottom up approach?
Oh, so values.
He's asking how CDOT came up with the values.
So that's an interesting thing. You know, CDOT has has goals, and the goals often change from year to year, as you might imagine, as new information comes in. And there's actually some things that are enduring in the organization. The mission of CDOT's enduring. I don't know that I've actually talked to anybody that says they were initially involved with the development of the mission of the organization. Frankly, because it's been so many decades ago that mission was developed. Same thing with our values. We have these 6 values, the Spicer values: safety, people, integrity, customer service, excellence, and respect. And I haven't done a survey on it, but I have asked people that have been here a long time, many decades, do they remember when these values were developed, and they say, no, they've been here. We've changed the wording some on some of the values to be a little bit clearer. We're not always perfect when we try to communicate as human beings. But the people that I've talked to that have been here, 3 decades and more, those values have been around that long. So I have to tell you, I'm not quite sure how the CDOT values got developed. I don't know. They've been these enduring anchors in the organization. We have executives come and go. We have goals that change. That's to be expected. It's good to have anchors in the organization, and those CDOT values, those 6 values are one of the ways we anchor the organization. Okay, I don't hear any other questions, so thank you for your time. Hopeful that this model was useful to you, and I will turn it back over. To Mary.
So we do have the open forum if anyone has any follow-up comments or questions they'd like to ask.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So one question for the general group, I guess. This is Corey with Public Safety. Is how do people go about promoting their values and making sure everyone is aware of them in their organization?
Well, I can answer some of that, I think, Corey. I think, at CDOT, the values, like Gary said, have been around for decades. And, we really consistently fall back when we're talking about anything to the values. We weave it into everything we do, performance evaluations. You see the posters on the wall. In fact, I think we're getting some metal signs made with our values right now. It's a constant reminder of this is how we're all expected to believe and behave and think and talk, and always being able to follow back on those things always brings any negative situation or comment or words into, oh, that's not aligning with what we are. And so I've been at CDOT for a little over 10 years now, and I really do believe in the values. And I think, all my fellow employees do too. So it's just always in there, and it's weaved into everything we do.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Gary? Or Molly? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, there was a question that came through. This is Bill Brovsky, by the way, that came through on the chat. And somebody had a question about how do you reinforce psychological safety in the organization? And I will tell you this, we started talking about psychological safety 2 years ago, but the way you reinforce it really is to talk about it all the time and putting it on the radar screen. It's like before every meeting, reinforcing the fact that every voice matters and every voice is valued, that people can speak actually freely and honestly, but also respectfully to move people to a better place. And it's also embedded in our accountability dashboard. We put a dashboard together, or I did here for the Denver Human Services, that actually measures psychological safety. It's a survey that people can take. First 5 questions are how safe people feel in the organization. The second 5 are getting results the right way. So we actually do measure psychological safety, and we talk about it all the time. We also have this thing called principles and values, and even though the values is pretty sound here at Denver Human Services, the service, teamwork, accountability, respect, and safety, what we found is those are core belief systems that are pretty solid that align with the mission. But we also found that principles are behaviors. They're behaviors that actually are aligned with the core value systems. So we actually do a lot of workshops with teams trying to align specific behaviors to support the core value structure. So hopefully that helps you a little bit in that.
Thanks, Bill. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Ted Herbert. I'm actually in Toronto. Thanks for the presentations today.
Oh, sure.
one of the things that we've tried to do once a set of values has been developed is provide people an opportunity to understand what the values look like in action. So we've built it into our recognition programs. We've built it into our anything that we do in terms of our performance management systems, reflect on and reinforce the values. But they're not, the values when we built them had attached behaviors. So, one of the values is connect collaboratively, and we had a list of behaviors that actually demonstrate what that looks like. So it's really about, we're had a lot of cross the organization conference calls and ways that leaders could have conversations in their team meetings and stuff, and reinforced it with materials that got sent out. And it really helped people to not only see what the words were, but understand what the behaviors looked like.
I think that's awesome. I think values and principles are only as good as you hold people accountable to them. So it really takes courage amongst all the employee base to really protect them. When somebody falls outside of them, of which we will, somebody has the courage to pull somebody back and just say, hey, listen, you probably weren't aware of it, but you violated one of our values. I'm telling you this because I care about you and I care about this organization, and we're trying to protect it. So I love what you're doing there, and I totally support that.
We have another question for Bill, if he's still available. Earlier, you mentioned the importance of measuring employee engagement often. What are some of the ways that we can measure engagement in a large organization effectively?
Yeah, that's a good question. They started measuring employee engagement before I came into the scene 2 years ago. So they did have specific questions, really trying to pinpoint the engagement of the organization. They still have those. We still measure those, and we measure them every 6 months. But what we found was we needed to expand that. And employee engagement is it's so representative of the kind of supervisors and leaders we have in the organization. So we started to include questions on surveys relative to what is the kind of connection your leader has with you. Do they have high levels of empathy? Do they care about you? Do they lead by intent, which means that if you go to them, for an answer, do you ask the question, what would you do? And if they're 75% right, you say, go do that and I'll support you 1,000%. And that's 25% that becomes magical because they own it. And they'll probably do it better than we ever thought we could do it anyway, because they're closest to the customer. But it's measurements like the 4 corners of connection, empathy, and measuring how your supervisor really, how well they do relative to empathy. How safe does the environment feel? So psychological safety is now an enhancement to engagement.
We also have a quick question for Gary. Very interested in just 1 second. They want to know, what is the difference between the principles and values at CDOT?
Yeah, this is Gary. Whoever put that in, if you could be just provide some clarity for me. We're at CDOT. We're certainly talking about values. Our 6 Spicer values. They're enduring. Not quite sure what you're getting at regarding principles. We definitely have a mission. It's and a vision for the organization. There are annual goals, and then those do change somewhat. We have our enduring values. I guess I would think of our values as being principles. You might be referring to something else, though. So I apologize. I may not be very helpful on that. Our values are crucial. Again, they're enduring values, and we promote those values a lot as ways to check are our words and our behaviors consistent with those values. Hope that helps whoever was asking that.
Oh, it says principles, as Corey spoke, are closer related to behavior. Would you agree with that?
I think, and again, Corey, appreciate that. There may be, those principles at public safety. It's a terrific thing. We tend not to use that word, although there definitely are ways, as Michelle was talking about before here at Colorado Department of Transportation, that we're trying to take those values, that are expressions of how we want to be. And we integrate that into our performance appraisal system. We call it PMP, our routine talks that we've got. It's just where we tend not to use that word principle, but we do have ways to translate that, like public safety is doing elsewhere in Colorado state government.
That's a really good response. I love that. One of the core values that they have in Denver is respect. And respect is defined in a lot of different ways. What I found that a behavior, which is basically a principle to really align with respect, is treat others the way you'd want to be treated. It's always being honest. It's when you're giving feedback, a principle might be, make sure you're giving feedback respectfully, but it is also intended to move people to a better place. And those are principles that actually work in conjunction with really core belief system of respect. Does that help too?
No response yet from the individual, but we do have another question. And I believe this is for everyone. Is anyone familiar with culture assessment tools, and does anyone have a favorite tool for this?
So this is Gary. I'll just jump in. The slide that we had before, is a good place to start. It's not perhaps not very sophisticated, but just to say, what's the culture you want? What's the culture that you've got, and what's the gap? Mm-hmm. Using some of the elements off of the various 7S model elements can help determine what you want and what you've currently got. I suggest you start simple, and a simple gap analysis is, and get some conversations going, by the way. Get conversations going around that. I recommend simple and easy is better than a little bit more sophisticated. There are sophisticated tools out there, but wait a while till you try to use them.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's Ted Herbert in Toronto again. And one of the things that I really found valuable was looking at Edgar Schein's work that, from MIT, so much value in the cultural change and cultural artifacts, and how to look at culture effectively, and what are the things that you need to reinforce, but also what are the things that you need to keep that are already being done. We tend sometimes to look at the organizational culture and want to change everything, and sometimes there are things that you don't want to change. And I think it's, it comes back to that assessment. What kind of things are working for you, and if they're working well for you, then reinforce them, don't change them, and then add to them with other pieces.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for the great discussion. If you continue to have questions, you can always reach out and ask them. Just a few announcements. We do have a YouTube video that will have all of the past webinars on it. That link should be getting sent out in the chat pane for you, and hopefully it will be up on our website soon. Also, we would like to let you guys know that we have some local chapters started. Those are also accessible through the website. You can see if there's anyone near you you can reach out and have a conversation with. Or if you're interested in starting your own local chapter, reach out to us and we can get your information up on the website for others to access. If any members have any announcements, feel free to hop on in.
So this is Gary. I will jump in. There's another community of practice that I belong to, the Transportation Lean Forum, and it's focused at lean professionals in transportation groups. It's coming up on Thursday, April 11th. If you're interested in more details, let us know. That there's a lot of change management related material that crosses over into Transportation Lean Forum, and I encourage anybody who's interested in learning more to contact us, and we'll get you onto the distribution list for that. Our very own Tess is the executive producer on that session, and I appreciate Tess's efforts on doing that.
All right, just a reminder that we do have our website where you can access this webinar, those local chapters mentioned, the YouTube page, and any other information you might be looking for. And I want to thank you all again. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We have our board that you can talk to. There should be the updated contact info on the slide deck that we upload to the website. So thank you so much.
Thank you.